The winning blueprint presents.
In the lab room.
Happy Monday to you. Welcome back. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Hope you had a great weekend as I did. A lot of preseason action taking place this weekend, and a lot of quarterbacks were on display. You got your first look at Andrew Luck, and boy, did he deliver. He looks good. And when I say he looks good, he looks as advertised. They talked about him being a can't-miss prospect, and you don't want to overreact off of the first preseason game, but he looked really good. He was poised in the pocket. When receivers were open, he did not miss. It is exactly what you want to see out of your rookie quarterback that you took first overall in the draft, that you expect to lead your franchise for the next 10 to 15 years. This is what you want to see right out of the gate from him. Granted, it was the Rams and it was the first preseason game. Still, if you're a Colts fan, you have to be impressed and very satisfied with what you saw on Sunday. Other quarterbacks around the league, I took a long look at Matt Flynn. He did throw a pick, but he looked really good out there. He was decisive, made a lot of good decisions, made a lot of good throws. And he surprised me. He showed me a little bit of mobility in and out of the pocket against the Titans on Saturday night. And so I don't know. I think he's going to win that job out in Seattle. You know, of course, they gave him the money this offseason. They want him to come in and put a stranglehold on that quarterback position. I like what I saw out of him on the pick that he threw. You know, it was a linebacker over the middle on play action fake that snuck under the route that he was going to. A little bit of air over that pass probably would have been sufficient. He would have made the completion. But, you know, that's what you want in the preseason is guys to learn from mistakes so they don't make them and repeat them in the regular season. Flynn looked good. And I think if you're Seattle, you take that. And with Tavares Jackson and his injury history, I think Flynn is really going to be the guy that you're looking for to carry you into the regular season. Again, first preseason game, you don't want to overreact, but he looked good. Also in Miami, with Garrard having that surgery, we talked about the Dolphins already, and we thought that Garrard would be the guy. I don't know. You can't be hurt and find a way to play on Sundays. So with him already having a history of injuries, him having to have that surgery, that's opening the door for some guys. Of course, I told you I wanted Matt Moore to start. Ryan Tannehill looked good. He was out there slinging the ball around, and he looked poised, and he threw the ball, and he displayed his arm a little bit. So it's a lot of guys making a name for themselves in the preseason. And what we forget so quickly is that last year was a lockout-shortened season, and so guys really didn't have camps. You know, rookies last year, they didn't get a full offseason. So this is a breath of fresh air for them. They're getting more tutelage than they got last year this time. So look for, and this preseason has been entertaining because coaches haven't scaled back, guys. They've been playing players whole quarters, whole halves in some instances in this first preseason game. So you got a lot of quality football over the weekend. Now let's get into our first lab report of the day, and we're in the NFC North. So let's talk about the Detroit Lions. The 2011 Lions did something that the Lions haven't done since 1999. That's make the playoffs. This team was clicking on all cylinders on offense. And a big part of that was, of course, Matthew Stafford. but it was really key. That engine was really powered by Calvin Johnson Jr. Calvin Johnson has established himself as one of the most dominant receivers in all of football. He's the most physically imposing receiver in the NFL right now, and you could argue ever. Calvin Johnson, his rare combination of height, speed, size in terms of length of arms and legs, his ability to snatch the ball out of the air, his sure hands, and his strength, his just physically brute strength separates him from every receiver in the league. This guy is someone that when you throw him the football, it's hard to get him down. He's so big, you don't expect him to run as fast as he does. He takes 3 or 4 steps, and he's by you. He's eating up your cushion, and he's by you. He can go up in traffic, in double and triple teams, and come down with the football. He's so strong that he's hard to tackle one-on-one. You need to bring help to get him down. Calvin Johnson is a strength for the Detroit Lions. And without him, I would venture to say that the Lions would not have made the playoffs last year and would not be a team that you would be that overly concerned with on offense. Another strength of the Lions is that they get people to turn over the football, and when they do, they take it and they score touchdowns with it. They say that the best offense is a good defense. Well, the Lions don't qualify as a good defense in any sense of the word. However, they do qualify for a potent offense on the defensive side of the ball. When they force turnovers, they look to score. They led the league in 2011 with 7 touchdowns on defense. That's a lot of touchdowns on defense. You don't see defenses scoring touchdowns on a regular basis. You look at that, and that basically equates to just a shade under scoring a defensive touchdown every 2 games. So the Lions were very proficient in getting turnovers and taking those turnovers and scoring with it immediately and not making the offense have to come on to the field. And you feel good as a whole team. It boosts the morale of the team when the defense can get a turnover and score with it. And the Lions did that the best in the NFL in 2011. Now, that was probably one of the only bright spots for that defense, honestly. As you go on to the weaknesses, the Lions were not a good defensive football team at all. They say that it's better to give than receive. The Lions give defensive coordinators a headache. But in that same token, they give offensive coordinators sweet dreams. The Lions gave up 24 points per game on defense last year. You can't give up those kind of points in this league and win consistently. The only reason they were able to do that, again, is because of that high-powered offense. The Lions gave up and were only second to the Raiders in the league in rushing yards. They gave up 5 yards per carry on the ground. You can't do that constantly in this league and think that you're going to win, especially on the ground. Most teams, if you ask them, would much rather give up passing yards than rushing yards. When you get pounded on the ground, it does something to you mentally. And when teams need to run out the clock later on in the game, they're able to do so because you can't get off of the field. Well, the Lions had it double bad last year because they couldn't stop the pass and they couldn't stop the run. So their defense was horrendous last year, and you can't hide bad defense. It's just no way to do it. You can't mask it. They tried to mask it with turnovers and with sacks, but it just wasn't enough because even if they got teams to 3rd and long, 3rd and 15, they were able to convert because that secondary wasn't very good. If they got in 3rd and short, they couldn't stop teams because that rush defense, that front 7, wasn't very good. So The Lions have a lot of work to do in 2012 if they want to get back to where they were and take that next step. Also, another weakness for the Lions was the fact that they were a very volatile team last year. They picked up a lot of penalties. They were very undisciplined. And I think that starts at the top with their head coach. Teams normally display their behavior on the field and are a reflection of their coach. And I felt like in 2011, we saw Jim Schwartz, who can be a hothead at times. You saw how he reacted in that post-game handshake with Jim Harbaugh of the 49ers. And I feel like his team reflects his demeanor. And he's a guy that's undisciplined himself. He can't control himself at times. He curses a lot. And I'm not saying that you can't curse. He curses a lot unnecessarily. He loses his temper. And his players do the same thing. The Lions have had a rash of off-the-field problems this season. Guys getting arrested for substance abuse, and Aaron Barrett even being charged with assault with a deadly weapon. And he actually was released by the team because of they had so much bad press over the summer that they couldn't afford to have another black eye, and they had to get rid of him. This is something they have to clean up in 2012. Jim Schwartz has to be a better coach at keeping his players under control. He needs to keep himself under control first and show the players that I do this and this is how we're going to do things. And he's got to be better because he leads by example. If he's out there acting crazy and losing his temper and going off on the sidelines, his players are doing the same thing. He has a young team. They're very impressionable. If he can't control himself, they won't control themselves either on the field. They can't afford to do that, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They did it a lot on the offense as well last year. You can't afford to have personal fouls, 15-yard penalties because you're losing your cool on the field. See Ndamukong Suh, especially. That's the weaknesses for the Detroit Lions. You go on to camp battles, and the Lions, although they have a lot of positions that you could probably say needed to have someone challenge them for their starting job, they don't have that many battles like you think they would or maybe should. Martin Mayhew and the GM of the Lions and that staff, they feel really good about a lot of the pieces that they have in place. And so they got a few things going on that I guess could classify as camp battles, but honestly, they don't have a lot going on. There's not a lot of change and turnover on that team from a year ago. The secondary is a mess. I talked about Aaron Barry being released. He was starting at the end of the season. Another corner that started for the Lions for a part of the season last year, that being Eric Wright, the cornerback that they let walk in free agency. And so the Lions secondary is a big ball of confusion right now. They really don't know what they have after Chris Houston at the starting corner position. And even when you venture into the safety spot, Amari Spivey, a safety that they thought that was going to provide depth and start and be a good safety in this league, at least a consistent safety, they don't like his consistency right now. They don't trust him back there. And they feel like whoever's back there opposite Louis Delmas has to be consistent because Louis Delmas is always hurt. He's the equivalent of Bob Sanders, a guy that when he plays can be dominant at times. He's a very hard tackling safety. He's a short tackler. He's able to make plays back there, but he's always hurt. He's small. He's a smaller guy. He throws his body around recklessly, and he gets injured often. So that other safety needs to be a constant back there, a guy that they can rely on to be steady. So when that other safety comes in for Louis Delmas, they don't have an extreme drop-off because they can trust that other safety to be the general back there. And Amari Spivey wasn't that guy for them last year. They are so disappointed in him. They have him running with the second team this year. So they're trying out other guys at that safety spot to see if someone can step in and possibly take over at that safety position. At corner, they're even looking at rookies right now, and they just had a preseason game on Saturday, and Bill Bentley, their third-round pick out of Louisiana Lafayette, he was starting at corner, and he had a pick. So Jim Schwartz wasn't quick to give him a pat on the back. He did get beat on a deep ball for about 35, 40 yards. It didn't result in a touchdown, but they were harping more on the fact that he was beat on a deep ball than. But I liked him. I thought he was aggressive. He broke on passes. The pick that he had, that was a very smart play. He saw it. He read it. That wasn't his man. He came off of his man and made an aggressive play on the ball. And that's what you like to see from rookies. A lot of times rookies are shell-shocked. They don't like to go and try to make plays. They want to make sure that they make the safe play. They don't trust their eyes a lot of times. He trusted his eyes on a lot of plays out there that I saw. He did get beat, and he said that he lost his technique on that one play. I like this guy, Bill Bentley, and he could be somebody that could start for them come week 1 and possibly throughout the whole regular season. You keep an eye on that, but outside of safety and corner, that secondary, it's not a lot of positions to be had on this Lions team. They like what they had last year, and they like what they have moving forward in 2012. We'll see how the secondary pans out, and if the pieces that they had for a team that was ranked 28th in defense, you would think that there would be a lot more changes. But apparently they're satisfied with what they have, so we'll see. Rookie watch. The Lions used their first-round draft choice on an offensive tackle, and offensive line was a position that wasn't a weakness, but it wasn't a strength either. They were adequate, and sometimes that's all you need, especially when your offense is so explosive. You just need adequacy, and that's what they had at the tackle position. Riley Reef, the tackle out of Iowa, was who they spent their first-round pick on. And you would think that when you draft a tackle that high, you're looking for him to come in and start right away. I don't think he's going to start right away. They have 2 tackles that they like right now and that they're going to go with. And they want Riley Reef to be the left tackle of the future. Right now, Jeff Backus is out there. He's a proven veteran that they like. He's at left tackle right now. So I could honestly see Reef going to right tackle first, getting his feet wet over there, sort of like Tyron Smith in Dallas, playing the right tackle position first, showing that he can be successful and dominant there, and then moving over to the left side. So that could be something that Lions fans should look out for. I don't know if that's going to happen right away. Gosler Sherrillis was not a world beater at right tackle. Wouldn't be surprised if he got a look there this season. Or just flat out, they took him and put him where Jeff Backus is at left tackle and say, here you go, young fella, show us what you can do. I don't see that happening because the left side is the blind side, and you want to make sure that Riley Reef is as advertised. So they probably will put him over at the right tackle position first to see what he can do and then move him over to the left if he's successful. Their second-round draft choice, Ryan Broyles, the receiver out of Oklahoma, and he tore his ACL in 2011. He was looking to be a borderline first-round pick. His injury, ACL injury, kind of put a halt to that. But he had so much film on tape that you couldn't ignore what he could bring to the table when healthy. And he does not have an injury history other than this ACL injury. So if he can get back to full strength, he will produce for the Lions in 2012. The Lions have a very capable receiving core, especially headlined by Calvin Johnson, a.k.a. Megatron. And so he's going to come right in behind Titus Young at that third wide receiver spot, and he's going to vie for playing time at that fourth wide receiver spot, and he's going to be able to produce. And he also adds another dimension in the special teams game. He can return punts and possibly kickoffs as well. So look for Ryan Broyles to get a lot of playing time in 2012. The third round selection of the Lions, again, I've talked about the corner Bill Bentley out of Louisiana Lafayette. This is someone that can come in and start for the Lions right away. I told you they don't have any certainty at corner after Chris Houston. So he's in the mix to start. He started the first preseason game. Again, you don't want to put too much stock into the first preseason game. Guys are injured. Coaches want to take a look at somebody. They give him a shot in the first preseason game. If he's still starting come third preseason game, then you know that the Lions really feel good about this guy and are going to give him a shot to start. All right. The Lions had a 4th and a 5th round pick of note. We'll just gloss over them. Their 4th round selection was outside linebacker Ronell Lewis out of Oklahoma. And their 5th round selection was the cornerback Chris Greenwood out of Albion. Now, again, that cornerback position is so wide open. Chris Greenwood is a height, weight, speed guy. He's a physical specimen. Out of Albion, a smaller college, so you don't know how well he'll produce against NFL caliber talent. When he went to the East-West game, he looked good against elite talent from Division 1A football. So if he can show that he can do it, because he's a 4-3 guy. His speed translates to the NFL. That's not going to change. He's a 6'1 corner. He's a big guy for the corner position. If his skill set translates to the NFL, this could be another guy you could look out for at the corner position. He's injured right now, so you really don't know what he can do. But the Lions aren't going to let this guy go because the upside is so high that if he comes back healthy, he could be somebody that could produce for the Lions on the field in 2012. With this injury, I don't know how long he's going to be out. This could hinder him from producing in 2012. But look for this guy down the line to be somebody that could play and possibly start for the Lions with his size and his speed and the skill set that he may bring to the league. We just don't know. We have to see. He has to get injured and get back on the field for us to be able to break down his game and analyze and see what he can do. Experiment. We're going to call this experiment Motor City Madness. And the reason why it's titled Motor City Madness is because the Lions fans were in a frenzy last year. The Lions finally gave their fans something to cheer about. They went to the playoffs for the first time in 12 years, and it was short-lived. They went in, they made a cameo, they had a cup of tea, and they were gone. But just that experience of getting there, feeling the playoff environment, and seeing that it's not the same as the regular season, and getting there and saying, we've been here before, we know how to react. The moment won't be too big for them when they get back. That was a lot for them. And they're looking to build off of that in 2012. Let's get into the research question. Can the Lions build on their 2011 success and take the next step, or was that just a figment of our imagination? Basically, the Lions want to build off of that 2011 season. They want to take that next step. They want to become a team that is a perennial playoff team. They go to the playoffs every year, and they want to start contending for a Super Bowl. If you were on that Lions roster, you were happy to get a ticket to the dance. You were happy to get to the show. You were just happy to make it to the playoffs. You hadn't been before. If you were on that Lions roster, a lot of them were in middle school probably the last time the Lions even made it to the playoffs. So you were just happy to be there. You were just happy to be amongst the playoff participants. The next time you get there, you won't have that feeling. You won't feel that way. You will feel like we belong here. We're supposed to be here. Now let's go and get it done while we're here. And so it'll be a whole different experience the next time they get there. But the question is, can they get there again? The defense was so porous last year. You can't continue to be bad on offense, even though on defense, even though that offense is as dynamic as it is. You want to be better on defense because you can't rely on the offense to carry you through week in and week out. This league is an offensive passing league. However, you still have to be able to stop people, and that is never more evident than in the playoffs. Hypothesis. If the Lions can dodge the injury bug, have a repeat performance on offense, and get better results from the defense, then the Lions can solidify themselves as perennial playoff participants with a legitimate shot at Super Bowl aspirations. And I firmly believe that if the Lions can get this defense to play better, get the offense to perform at the level that they did in 2011, and stay relatively injury-free. And really, when I say stay away from the injury bug, I'm talking to Matt Stafford. Without Matt Stafford, this team is average. Without Calvin Johnson, this team is average. Calvin Johnson really doesn't get hurt. We're going to see if that Madden curse is what it's been for the last decade. He's on the Madden cover this year. Hopefully he can break that jinx. But Matt Stafford, or Matthew Stafford, has to stay healthy for this team to reach any kind of level of expectations, because he is the quarterback of this team, the undisputed quarterback of this team, and he leads them on the field. He threw for over 5,000 yards last year, and that's rare in this league. Guys don't do that on a consistent basis. Guys don't do that often. We really don't have guys throw for 5,000 yards in this league, and he was able to surpass that mark last year. And so you have to believe that he can build on that. And the reason he was able to take that big leap, he went from throwing for just a shade over 3,000 all the way to 5,000. It was because he stayed healthy for 16 games. That was the first time he did it in his career. And if he can manage to stay healthy, play 16 games for the Lions, this offense will be dynamic year in and year out, because Matthew Stafford has the tools to flat out get it done in this league. And it doesn't hurt to have Megatron to just throw the ball up to. I would say, and I'm not over-exaggerating, 700 of his passing yards came from him just throwing a ball up to Megatron and Megatron making the play. I think that's in the Lions playbook. Hey, just throw it to Calvin and see what he can do on this play. I don't care if he's double covered. Just throw it to him and see if maybe he'll get pass interference. They do it, and it works. One of three things is going to happen when you throw the ball to Calvin Johnson, unless it's an egregious throw. He's going to catch it, you're going to get pass interference, or it's going to be incomplete. And the Lions know that, and that's why that throw it up to Calvin is probably in the playbook. All right. So let's get into the materials needed. No medical Matthew. We just talked about it. He has to stay healthy. 16 games is what the Lions need him to play. We've seen what he can do for a full 16-game slate. If he plays 16 games, he can be ultra productive in this league. He threw for over 5,000 yards last year, one of 4 quarterbacks to do so. And he's got the weapons around him to produce. If he can stay healthy, the sky is the limit for this Lions offense. Heavens to Megatron, or as I like to say, heavens to Megatron. If Calvin Johnson can continue to produce the numbers that he did in 2011, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with for the rest of his career. He's been consistent since he stepped foot in this league as being a playmaker. Last year, he had 1,681 yards receiving, 5 yards short of the Lions franchise record set by Herman Moore in 1994. This guy was flat out getting it done last year, and I felt like if they would have went to him just a little bit more, he would have broken that record and challenged for Jerry Rice's all-time receiving yards record in 1995 when the 49ers won the Super Bowl. He had over 1,800 yards in that season. Calvin Johnson, if anybody's going to break that record, it's going to be Calvin Johnson. His skill set is so dynamic. His rare combination of size, speed, his excellent hands, and his brute strength is unmatched in this league. And corners have a hard time stopping him from making plays because he's so physically imposing. I don't think people realize the playoff game, the monumental, historic playoff game that he had in their first playoff game last year against the Saints. He went in, and because the Saints were running 7-on-7 against that Lions defense and put up 45 points, people don't realize what Calvin Johnson did in that game. He had 11 catches for 212 yards in that playoff loss to the Saints with 2 touchdowns. He was unstoppable. He was a man-child in that game. He was a beast. He was heavens to Megatron in that game. And if he can continue to do that, and I don't see why he can't, the Lions offense will only go as far as he and Matthew Stafford take it. You take him off this team and they're not a playoff team. So the Lions need Calvin Johnson to continue to produce for them to be where they want to be in 2012. Defense roars, offense soars. The defense were like cats last year. They weren't like lions. They were like cats. You know, they were scratching people with their little claws. They were scratching people. Nobody was afraid of this defense last year. They were ranked 24th in the league. 28th in the league, and they gave up 24 points a game. No one was afraid of them. They were looking forward to playing this Lions defense. And so they have to be better. They have to be more consistent in 2012. They have to get teams off the field. They put too much pressure on their offense to produce because they're not stopping teams. They're making their offense have to score points. And their offense can't afford to kick field goals. They have to score touchdowns because their defense is giving up touchdowns. They're not forcing people to kick field goals. The defense has to be better. And the offense, as long as Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson are healthy, are going to continue to soar. They're going to continue to produce and be one of the most high-powered offenses in the league. They're going to continue to be a top 5 offense in this league because they have the pieces around Matthew Stafford to get it done in the passing game. And so if the Lions can continue to stay healthy, they'll be fine on offense. That defense has to come along. Depth, are you any good? That's what the Lions have to ask themselves. They're a team that gets banged up quite often. The reserves, their depth have to be able to step in and play at a level of play that is going to stay within the flow of what the Lions are trying to do on either side of the ball. That play can't drop off the face of the earth if guys go down. We talked about the running back position and Mikel LaShaw and Javid Best not being able to stay healthy. You talk about Matthew Stafford possibly getting injured. You look at the receiver position. Can guys step up if someone were to go down? Offensive line, same thing. Secondary. You need to have guys that can step in and keep the level of play consistent so that this team can continue to excel and take that next step to being a playoff, perennial playoff team each and every season. And the way to do that is to make sure that the depth is somewhat consistent and able to step in for guys when they go down and the team does not miss a beat. Turnovers, nice. Consistency, better. On defense, I'm pretty sure that the Lions would much rather have consistency than just getting turnovers and scoring off of them. If you ask Lions defensive coordinator Gunther Cunningham, which would he rather have, turnovers for touchdowns or consistently being good and getting off the field on defense, I'm pretty sure he would take the latter. He would say, let my defense be consistent and get off the field on third downs and get the ball back to the offense. A punt is just as good as a turnover in most cases. Of course, turnovers get you better field position than a punt. But either way, with the offense that they have, you want to just get the ball back into their hands. They'll take care of the rest. Just get the ball back into their hands so that they can produce. Now, of course, if you ask Gunther Cunningham, he wants both. I want turnovers and I want consistent defense. That's what we're striving for. But if he had to choose one, he would take consistent defense over just getting turnovers. Data. Let's talk about the hard numbers that the Lions need in 2012 to achieve success and get to where they want to be. Matthew Stafford needs 4,080 passing yards for 38 touchdowns and 20 interceptions and 61.7% completion percentage. Now, 20 interceptions is a lot, but when you throw the ball as much as the Lions do, and you try to fit the ball into tight windows as Matthew Stafford does, you're going to have turnovers. 20 is okay for that offense because of the amount of points they score. The only problem with 20 turnovers from the quarterback position is that you put the defense back on the field, and we've already talked about how inept the defense can be at times. If Stafford turns the ball over 20 times, it can be a hindrance to this Lions team overall, but they throw the ball so much you got to expect turnovers. I know they would love that number to be a lot less, but for the amount of times that they ask him to throw the football, you're going to have turnovers. They're going to occur. And he's somewhat of a gunslinger. He tries to throw the ball into areas because he has a strong arm that necessarily they don't fit. And so he has turnovers that naturally he gets on his own volition. So 20 is a lot, but in the scale of their offense, is not as many as you would think. Calvin Johnson, 91 to 97 receptions, 1435 to 1470 receiving yards, and 12 to 14 touchdowns. Megatron is a force. These are numbers that he can put up in his sleep if healthy. I expect him to put these numbers up, and don't be surprised if he exceeds them. Of course, he needs a healthy Matthew Stafford to do so. But if he's in the lineup and he's playing every week and he's healthy, these numbers are pedestrian. And you can't say that about 90% of the league, but these numbers are pedestrian for Calvin Johnson. Nate Burleson, 62 to 67 receptions for 658 receiving yards and 4 to 6 touchdowns. Nate Burleson has been a breath of fresh air for these Detroit Lions. He's been a leader in the locker room. He's been a guy that they can rely on the field to take a little bit of that pressure off of Calvin Johnson. And I actually didn't think he was going to be that big of a piece for this offense when he came to Detroit. But he has. He's been a stabilizing force in that locker room, a guy that's not afraid to get on guys and get them to play at their highest level. And he's been somebody that you could throw the ball to and he'll make a play opposite Calvin Johnson. He's been a breath of fresh air for the Detroit Lions. And Brandon Pettigrew. This is a tight end that has come into the league and been very consistent, more so than I thought he would have been coming out of Oklahoma State. He's come in the league and quietly posted back-to-back 700 receiving yard seasons, and Stafford likes to go to him. He likes to force the ball into his big tight end, and he just needs to be more productive in the red zone. Stafford needs to be able to trust him going to him in the red zone. With Calvin Johnson being one of your red zone targets, you're not going to get a lot of balls in the red zone, but when they do get thrown to you, you have to make plays on them. Look for Brandon Pettigrew to have 78 to 85 catches for 725 to 755 receiving yards and 4 to 6 touchdowns. Those touchdown numbers need to be elevated for him to become an upper echelon tight end. But right now, he's quietly becoming a consistent force in the league. And if he can just get more touchdowns in the red zone, make plays when they're there to be made, he can be a guy that can be a top 10 tight end in this league. Lions running backs, and they don't stay healthy. So it's going to be running back by committee. Look, Mikael LaShore tore his ACL last year. Didn't play all of last year. Javid Best, a guy that has concussion injuries. This goes back to college. He had that 9-foot leap and fall and down on his head that caused a monumental concussion. He's had a few concussions throughout his career in the NFL. He hasn't even been cleared to come back from the concussion that he suffered last year. And so you don't know when he's going to be back, if he's going to be back. Mikael LaShore is injured again, ACL heel. Now he has a hamstring pull. This guy is someone that can't stay on the field. He can't stay healthy. You don't know what you're getting out of him. They had to go in their recycling bin and go and pull Kevin Smith out, a guy they released a couple years ago that they had drafted early on in the draft a few years ago, and get him to produce. He's a guy that's always injured. So the Lions are going to be running back by committee because you can't rely on one guy to stay healthy. So look for the Lion running backs, whoever it may be. Whether it's Kevin Smith or Keelan Williams back there toting the rock, they just need healthy bodies back there to carry the football so that the offense can stay on course, can be an on-time, on-schedule offense, and keep defenses honest. All right. They need 350 to 375 carries for 1,550 rushing yards and 9 to 11 touchdowns. So let's get into the independent variable. And the Lions are a boom or bust team. They're either scoring touchdowns via their defense or they're giving up touchdowns on defense. There's really no middle ground with this defensive unit. They're either scoring touchdowns on defense or giving them up to the opposing offense. Now, of course, the Lions do get their fair share of punts and 3 and outs and what's may have you. But the fact of the matter is they're giving up touchdowns too often. They need to emulate the Patriots in the sense that they need to become a bend but don't break defense. They need to, if they're going to give up yards like they do, and they're not a great defense, they're not going to be elite, so they're going to give up yards in chunks. You have to bog teams down, harden, stiffen in the red zone like the Patriots do, and force teams to kick field goals. That's what the Lions need to do. That needs to be their formula for success, for them to be successful in the 2012 season. They can't allow teams to score touchdowns, put pressure on their offense to score touchdowns all the time. They need to be able to stop teams from putting 7 on the board and make them substitute that with a 3. That takes us to our dependent variable. If they can find a way to get off the field, get stops, and find ways to be a bend but don't break defense and force teams to kick field goals instead of scoring touchdowns, this Lions team can go back to the playoffs again for the second consecutive season. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but the offense needs help from the defense. You can't expect to get away with the ineptitude that they displayed on defense last year and think that the offense is just going to be able to carry them through. Again, they have to be better on defense. That moves us to the constant. And if you've been watching Detroit Lions football for over the last 20 years, then you know exactly who the constant is. But I know you haven't been watching Detroit Lions football for the last 20 years, and for good reason. They haven't given you a reason to watch them. So I'll tell you who the constant is. It's place kicker Jason Hanson. He's been with the Lions for 2 decades. He's going into his 21st season as Detroit Lions place kicker. The Lions are comfortable with Hanson. As you can see, he's been their kicker for the last 20 years. And I think that's a remarkable feat by Jason Hanson because you don't see that kind of longevity from any player in the league, let alone a kicker, which is a high turnover position. You've had players like Bruce Matthews and Jackie Slater, who were offensive linemen, do that and get close to approaching 20 years in the league with different teams. But he's done it with one team, and he's been able to be consistent for the Lions, someone they can rely on to pound field goals through the uprights. And you just have to take your cap off to Jason Hanson for what he's been able to do over these last 20 years and be a consistent force for the Lions in the kicking game. And you just have to say that is a remarkable and astonishing feat because you just don't see that happening in the National Football League. Jason Hanson has been and will continue to be a constant for the Lions because going into every season, you know who the place kicker is going to be for the Lions. He's got kids older or the same age as a lot of these players on the Lions roster. He played with Barry Sanders. He was on the team the last time they made the playoffs. All of these are things that you can't even fathom. Barry Sanders has been out of the league for such a long time. It's hard to fathom somebody having played with Barry Sanders. He was on a team with Barry Sanders. And for a long time, you have to think, he's been their kicker since 1992. So he's played quite a bit with Barry Sanders. It's amazing what Jason Hanson has been able to do, and he's a constant for the Detroit Lions. That moves us into the conclusion. The Lions are on the cusp of building something that has substance to it. The Lions are right there. They're close to having something that you can say will be around for years to come. but they have to continue to build on what they did in 2011. It's going to be hard because that division is so brutal. They have to be better on defense. The Bears have made upgrades to their team. The Packers are a perennial powerhouse. They have to make the necessary adjustments within their organization to stay afloat in that division. The NFC is wide open. Again, after Green Bay, after the Super Bowl champion Giants, and after the 49ers, there is space being jockeyed for in the NFC. The Lions are there. They were in the playoffs last year. They just want to hold on to their spot. However, with their defense the way it is and constructed right now, I just don't know if you can trust a lot of these younger players that they're going to have to rely on. The Lions are going to have to rely on young guys, especially at the cornerback position, to come in and stabilize some of these positions. And I just don't know if you can do that in their first year and ask them and rely on them and lean on them to be guys that can produce for you right away. They're going to make mistakes, and the Lions are going to have to grow with these young players. And with that being said, I have the Lions at 9-7, barely missing the playoffs this year. If you're a Lions fan, though, don't get down on your team, okay? Keep expecting greatness from the Detroit Lions because you just don't know if you're going to get it. It might come here in the near future. Keep expecting greatness from the Detroit Lions because you just might get it here shortly. They are on the cusp of doing something special if they can stay healthy and get pieces in here to fit in this puzzle. The Lions will be a team that will be a perennial powerhouse in the near future if they can keep their core together and get some of these pieces that they're missing. Stay tuned, Lion fans. Don't get discouraged. Your team is right there. They just have deficiencies that I don't know if they'll be able to overcome in the 2011 season. But they could be, the 2012 season, excuse me. But they could be right back in the mix in 2013. Stay tuned. And that'll do it for the Lions and their lab report. We're going to go into this lab quiz, and then we'll come back with the Minnesota Vikings.
Lab quiz. Lab quiz.
And I'm back. And I'm back with the Minnesota Vikings and their lab report. The Minnesota Vikings were a disappointing 3-13 last season, and rightfully so. They're a team in transition, and when you're a team in a transitional period, in a lockout season with no offseason, you draft a rookie quarterback who ultimately ends up starting after 10 games, and you have a new head coach who was there last year but got the full-time head coaching job in Leslie Frazier. You're going to have some woes. You're going to have some growing pains. And the Vikings had plenty of those in 2011. The problem is those growing pains hurt so much. They continue to hurt in 2012. I don't see them being a good football team. I don't see the future being bright for them right now. At least not yet. I hope they show us something in 2012. But those growing pains are looking like gunshot wounds and stab wounds right now. They're just not a little tummy ache or a little abrasion. These are looking like some serious growing pains that are going to linger for a long time. Let's get into their strengths, however. The Minnesota Vikings have two strengths that are unquestionable. You look at Adrian Peterson, when healthy, best back in the league. Unquestioned. You got people making arguments for Chris Johnson and Maurice Jones-Drew and Matt Forte and Arian Foster. Adrian Peterson. Give me Adrian Peterson. Give me AD all day. I'll take Adrian Peterson over any back in the league when healthy. His combination of strength, speed, and the ability to make people miss in space is without a doubt the best in the National Football League. I think a run that just epitomizes who Adrian Peterson is his run against the Cleveland Browns. I want to say it was last year. He took a handoff down the sideline, made two people miss, stiff-armed another guy, stopped in mid-stride, stopped, hip-tossed another Browns defender, and then in an instant second, got back to top speed and scored a touchdown. The guy is phenomenal. He's a rare talent in this league and a joy to watch. Adrian Peterson, when healthy, and I wish this guy a speedy recovery from his ACL tear a year ago. I hope to see him back because the Minnesota Vikings are unwatchable without Adrian Peterson. I'm going to just leave it at that. Adrian Peterson is a strength for this Vikings offense. You flip to the other side of the ball, and the Vikings have something that is a valued commodity in this league. An elite pass rusher in Jared Allen. He is a prototypical 4-3 defensive end. But that's where all the similarities and all the likeness ends. This guy is unique in his first step, his ability to get off the football, he's got that country tree chopping strength. You know, he looks wiry, his frame is rubbery. He doesn't look overly strong when you look at him. But he gets under tackles' pads and jacks them up into the quarterback. And if that wasn't enough, he has a plethora of moves. He can reach in his bag and go and get other moves. Like a DeMarcus where he bends so gracefully. Like I said, he has that wiry, rubbery type frame that allows him to bend at ridiculously low angles that tackles that are 6'6", 6'5", they can't bend down that low and get to him. And he gets to your quarterback. He almost broke the sack record last year. He came within a half sack of tying it and a full sack of breaking Michael Strahan's 22 sack record, 22 and a half sack record. And so he's a strength for the Minnesota Vikings. That's it. That's where the strengths stop. You get to weaknesses, and the Vikings have a lot of them. And their 2011 season was one to forget. And you look, they have a lot of things to build on, and their strengths don't outweigh their weaknesses, and it's not even close. And you start at the offensive line. And Charlie Johnson was the left tackle last year, and he prompted them to go out and draft Matt Khalil with their first overall selection in the 2012 NFL draft because he was so bad last year. And so they looked to move him to left guard. He's not a good left tackle, so you think that moving him to left guard is a good idea. I'm not sure if that's a good idea. The line is a weakness because they just have mixed match parts. A big problem with the Vikings, and you would think that they would have a lot more camp battles because they were so bad last year, is the fact that they just don't have the talent. They don't have the depth necessary to pose positional battles like they should. Guys that should be challenged for their positions who had subpar seasons last year are not being challenged for their positions because there's no one behind them to push them for their position. So they remain the starter. And that's a sad sight if you're a Vikings fan because you get left with guys who probably shouldn't be starting or who should at least have to work harder for their spot to make them better. But they're not. They're unchallenged starters. And you're a 3-13 team. You should have camp battles all over the place. That line is littered with positions that should be being camp battles. They're not. You look at wide receiver. They don't have a true number one wide receiver. Since Sidney Rice has departed for free agency, the Vikings have been searching far and wide for a number one wide receiver. I don't know about you because they've tried Percy Harvin. He did his best impersonation of a one. I don't know about you. I like my Percy Harvin in the slot. I can't speak for you. I like my Percy Harvin in the slot. So him playing as the number one wide receiver doesn't do anything for me. I need him in the slot. He could be a number two, but I prefer my Percy in the slot. So they need to find a number one. Problem is they don't have that guy on the roster. They don't even have a guy that's really a consistent number two on their roster. It's really bad at wide receiver. It's not much better at corner. Their secondary was horrendous last year. Let me tell you just how bad the Vikings were on defense last year in the secondary. I'm going to list a few of their quandaries from a year ago. The Vikings were tied for 31st with 13 plays of 40 yards given up in their passing game. If you go back to that Broncos game, they made Tim Tebow look like Steve Young. Tim Tebow had well over 300 yards passing. Him and Demaryius Thomas looked like Steve Young and Jerry Rice in that game. They were running loose in that secondary. Tim Tebow was having a field day. The Vikings were terrible in that game. The Vikings were 31st in the league in giving up 28 points per game. A lot of this came through the passing game. They were horrendous last year in pass defense. Their safety position was a mess last year. Their corner position was a mess last year. They gave up plays in the passing game, and they gave up 28 yards per game, and a lot of that came through the air and the passing game. You keep moving on down the list of ineptitude last year, and the next stop is they only had 8 interceptions last year. That's a meager 8 interceptions over a 16-game season. That means you're getting 1 interception per 2 games. Every 2 games, you get lucky and get an interception. That's horrendous in this league, a league that is predicated on getting turnovers and winning the turnover battle. The Vikings were terrible in that in 2011. You move right along, they were dead last in the league in amount of touchdowns given up with 34. They gave up the most passing touchdowns last year, and you can't give up touchdowns in the passing game. They gave it up way too often last year, and it was too easy. It was like taking candy from a baby. They were giving up touchdowns through the air every time you blink. And if you're a Vikings fan, it had to turn your stomach watching that Vikings defense on the field. No league was safe with this Vikings defense last year. You move on to camp battles, and there should be a lot more battles than there are in camp right now. Again, I've spoken to it briefly. They don't have the depth or the talent level to challenge guys who were subpar last year. You look at the left guard spot. Charlie Johnson moved from left tackle, where he was terrible last year, to left guard. He should be challenged for that spot. That spot shouldn't just be given to him. But they don't have anybody to challenge him for that spot. You look at right guard. They have a guy, Brandon Fusco, who's going to start at right guard for them this year. He's a converted right guard from center. Someone should be challenging him. That guy the Vikings were hoping was going to be their free agent acquisition, Jeff Schwartz from the Panthers. He's hurt. He's out right now. He might not even play in the preseason at all, so you don't know what he's bringing to the table. So Brandon Fusco probably is going to have to start by default. You look at wide receiver. They have a logjam at wide receiver. After Percy Harvin and Michael Jenkins, the 2 senior veteran members of that wide receiver corps, you have positions available to be filled. You look at Steven Burton, a guy they like, Jarius Wright, their 3rd-round selection in the 2012 draft, Devin Aromashadu. These are guys that are all looking to solidify spots along that receiving corps. You know, the order may be juggled through the preseason to see who's going to be the slot guy, the third receiver, fourth receiver. But those are the guys that are looking to make spots. These aren't household names. These aren't guys that I think are going to be starters in the league, but they're guys that can be contributors. The problem with the Vikings is that they got to find more guys that can start, that can be difference makers. They don't have those guys other than Percy Harvin along that wide receiving group. You move along to corner, and the Vikings are so bad at corner. They have 11 corners on the roster right now. And that's not uncommon in the league with the 90-man rosters. Teams like to load up on corners. But they don't know out of these 11 corners who's going to make the team. Generally, when you have a lot of corners, it's just for guys to take reps. You have 3 or 4 guys that you know are making your roster, and then a couple of people are fighting for roster spots at the back end. They have Chris Cook, who's going to start for them. They have they have a 3rd round selection in Josh Robinson, a corner out of Central Florida, and then they have Antoine Winfield, who is the aging veteran of that group. Those are the only 3 that are short roster spots. And I'm not even sure about Antoine Winfield. I think they're going to have him back. They need a veteran presence along that group. But I'm not even sure if he's going to make the team. Of those 11 players they have in camp right now, maybe 2 or 3 of them are legit starters in the league right now. It's really bad. All I can say is, Vikes, yikes, what you're doing right now. Woo! Glad I'm not a Vikings fan. Moving on to Rookie Watch, the Vikings selected their 1st round draft choice, Matt Khalil, with their 2nd overall pick in the 1st round of the 2012 NFL Draft. The Vikings are hoping that he's a 13-year linchpin at left tackle, that they're going to plug in and play him from day one and look for him to be dominant. This guy has every physical tool you look for in a left tackle: quick feet, heavy hands, good lateral movement. I don't see why he can't come in and solidify that left tackle spot, especially with a young quarterback. You need to keep him upright. Christian Ponder needs protection to be able to showcase what he can do. That's why having Charlie Johnson at left guard is so scary, because you don't know if Charlie Johnson is a good left guard. And having no one challenge him for that position is scary. We move on. They came up in the 1st round again. They double-dipped and got them a 1st round safety in Harrison Smith, the safety out of Notre Dame. They love his ability to cover. He's got good athleticism. Their safety position was one of the worst, if not the worst, in the NFL last year. And so Harrison Smith is going to be called upon to start immediately. And they're hoping him and Chris Cook can be some pieces that they can build around moving forward in the secondary, because their secondary, there's so much uncertainty going on after those 2 guys. They're looking for him to step in and provide immediate dividends and be a stabilizing force in their secondary this year. They're looking for him to play from day one. You move on, 3rd round pick. The Vikings drafted Josh Robinson, the corner from Central Florida, a guy that has the ability to start in this league. Again, he's young. He's a little raw. He's got the speed. He's got the intangibles. They just going to have to coach him up. Don't be surprised don't be surprised if this guy is starting at some point in the 2012 season, because they're so bad at corner right now. There's no talent outside of Chris Cook, and Chris Cook has a problem staying healthy. He has a penchant for getting injured. And so Josh Robinson could be thrown in the fire early on and starting at corner. The Vikings had 3 4th round selections, and the 1st and the 3rd of those are really of note. 2 receivers from Arkansas, the first of which was Jarius Wright. The latter was Greg Childs. They had big plans for these receivers. Jarius Wright is still in the mix, but Greg Childs has a big frame. He's 6'3", large catch radius, a guy that got injured at Arkansas, was doing a lot of things before his injury. And so he dubbed himself the steal of the draft because his upside is enormous if he can stay healthy. He can produce, on the field. And so it was very disappointing and disheartening for the Vikings to see him go down in camp. He tore both of the patella tendons in both his knees. Ouch! How do you do that? That is so awkward and rare to have happen. I wish him a speedy recovery. That is the worst, one of the worst injuries I've ever heard of. And so he's going to have a long road to recovery if he's able to come back. And so that was a guy that they were looking to actually have maybe be a starter for them. He's a big guy, somebody you could put across the field from Percy Harvin. He might have been somebody that could have stepped up in the mold of a Sidney Rice. He had a Sidney Rice type frame. They were looking for some big things from him. Now he's gone. They're back to square one with that receiving corps. They got a lot of pieces. They're hoping they can fit them into a puzzle and make them work. Only time will tell. You move on to the Vikings experiment, and I dubbed it Purple Player Seekers because the Vikings are looking for anybody of any talent to step in and give them some production. They are a team that is really suffering from that all-in chip approach that they took to Brett Favre in that 2010 season when they really went for it, the gusto, and tried to win a Super Bowl. They really mortgaged the future trying to win, and rightfully so. They were so close in 2009. But now they're paying for it. They're rebuilding, new coach, new quarterback, a lot of turnover at key positions, no talent to which to speak of. And so they're really in a transitional period. And the bad part is this period doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. Let's get into their experiment, though. Research question. Will Adrian Peterson be back in time for the regular season? And if so, how effective can he be? And can Christian Ponder validate the Vikings' first-round selection of him with his play in 2012? Those are the two questions you have to look for to answer if you're the Vikings in 2012. Is Adrian Peterson going to be back? I think he'll be back game one. I don't want him to rush this injury and re-aggravate it. He's such an important player for the Vikings and such a joy to watch. I don't want to see him re-injure himself trying to rush back, but he's such a physical specimen. He's such a workout warrior. There's no doubt in my mind he'll be ready to suit up week one. The real question is, can Christian Ponder validate their selection of him in the first round? He was a reach to many for the Vikings with the 12th overall pick in the 2011 NFL Draft. People didn't expect him to go top 15. And so he proved that he has some talent. He has some of the ability to be a good quarterback in this league, but he has to prove that he can do it consistently. He was a little erratic last year. There was times where you would watch him and say, I could see why they used this pick on him. There were other times where you said, he's got a long way to go as a quarterback in this league. They need to put pieces around him. He can't show what he can do if the line can't protect him, which they didn't last year. And his pieces around him aren't producing for him. They're going to have to look to other areas to be productive and help Christian Ponder mature and progress as a quarterback in 2012. Hypothesis. If Adrian Peterson is able to rebound from his ACL injury and be the Peterson of old, and Christian Ponder can continue to progress, then the Vikings can be respectable in 2012 and build for the future. Look, you're not a playoff team. You know that off bat. You know, everybody feels like they have a chance before the season begins. You don't. As a Viking fan, you know you're not making the playoffs this year. If you don't know that, you're kidding yourself. And look, I'm all for optimism. I'm not here to shoot down anybody's dream, but you're not going to the playoffs. I'm going to shoot down your dream. You're not going to the playoffs this year. But what you want to do is build for the future. You want to put a team on the field that can compete week in and week out and see if you can find some diamonds in the rough, a hidden gem here and there. See if you can find players to build around. You need to start stockpiling talent. You don't have a lot of talent right now. You need to start finding ways to get talent on the field. Materials needed. Yo, Adrian! You good? That's what the Vikings have to ask themselves in 2012. Adrian, are you good? Are you ready to step back on the field and be the dominant force that we need you to be? Christian Ponder needs a dominant running game to supplement the passing game. If they can get Adrian Peterson back, and I like Toby Gerhart. At first, when they drafted him, I was like, hey, I'm not a big Toby Gerhart fan. He's looking more and more like a fullback every day. Toby Gerhart has proved me wrong. He's come in the league. When given carries, he's been productive. He's a battering ram. Defensive backs don't like having to tackle this guy. He's so big, and he's a little shifty. He's not that fast, but if he gets loose, he can make things happen. Toby Gerhart can produce for the Vikings, but you want to see Adrian Peterson back if you're a Vikings fan. That's first and foremost. Ponder this. You need Christian Ponder to have teams thinking about stopping him. You need Christian Ponder to mature and progress and get better as the season goes along and prove to people that he is the quarterback that the Vikings chose with that first round selection. Can he do it? Only time will tell. You saw flashes last year, but flashes aren't enough. As the great Brian Billick once said, son, your potential is going to get me fired. He can't continue to show potential and not show us actually what he can do and have it come to fruition on the field. He has to produce because him and Leslie Frazier are going to be tied at the hip. Continued assault on quarterbacks. That defensive line is as good as it gets in the National Football League. Jarrett Allen on one side, Brian Robertson on the other side. These guys get pressure. They get sacks. They get results. They force fumbles. This defensive line is so good, it makes you scratch your head as to why the pass defense is so bad. You're wondering, do these guys have to get sacks on every play or get to the quarterback? Because if they don't, the secondary has been so bad. And the defensive line is so good, it doesn't match up. But again, that's what happens when you have a lot of talent at one position but are lacking it in others. And the secondary is lacking talent right now. But that D-line is the truth. Secondary has to make a primary improvement. The secondary was horrendous. It was a sore spot and a black eye on this defense. The defensive line did their part. They got sacks. They generated turnovers by forcing fumbles. The front seven did their job in stopping the run. The Minnesota Vikings have always been a team that's been able to stop the run. They were one of the better teams in the league at stopping the run last year. That pass defense was the worst. It was one of the worst defenses in the league. And the secondary has to make a big leap from last year and get better for this team to make strides and look like a competitive team on the football field. Wide receivers step up. Percy Harvin is out there trying to do his thing. He needs help. I don't know if he's going to get it or not, but somebody's got to step up and help this guy. He can't do it by himself. He's returning kicks. He's returning punts. He's doing receiver. Somebody's got to step up and help Percy Harvin. Best friend, tight ends. The Vikings went out and got John Carlson to be their #1 tight end. And I didn't know if that was necessary because I love Kyle Rudolph, the second-year man out of Notre Dame. I think he can be an upper echelon tight end if given the opportunity. Him and Christian Ponder came in the league together. They've been growing together. They've been working a lot together in the offseason. Look for Christian Ponder to try to find Kyle Rudolph. He's a big boy. He's 6'5". He can go up and make plays. He has strong hands. When he gets his paws on the ball, it's hard to dislodge it from him. He's going to catch the football when he gets his hands on the ball. Kyle Rudolph is a guy that can make plays in the passing game. John Carlson has been hurt in this offseason. Expect him to be back. If those guys can become a tandem for the Vikings, look out. Opposing defenses, they could be a tandem that can be hard to stop in the Vikings offense, especially if they get the running game with Adrian Peterson and Toby Gerhart working. Play action fake, finding the tight ends over the middle will open up some of the receivers on the outside to potentially make some plays. Get more turnovers. We talked about the Vikings only having 8 interceptions a year ago. That's not going to get it done. You have to be better in the turnover department. The defensive line, they force turnovers, they force fumbles, they recover those fumbles. They do their job. The secondary has to do a better job of getting turnovers and helping supplement that defensive line who is working their butt off to make this defense stay afloat. Secondary has to do something to help that defensive line because they're not pulling their weight right now. The secondary has to get turnovers. They have to be better in 2012. So let's move on to data for the Vikings and what they need to just be a competent football team on the field. Christian Ponder needs to have about 3,100 passing yards to be that quarterback to take that next step. They need him to play all 16 games as well. You're looking for about 17 to 21 touchdown passes, and you're looking for 13 to 15 interceptions. That's not a really good touchdown to turnover ratio, but he's looking to take that next step. He's looking to grow, and there's not a lot of weapons around him outside of the tight ends and Percy Harvin. You know, of course, he's got weapons in the backfield, but out wide, there's not a lot of help. So, you know, look for him to still make mistakes. He's a young quarterback. He didn't have an offseason a year ago. People forget that lockout stopped young guys like Christian Ponder from having an offseason. This is his first real offseason. He's going to need time. He just needs to show that if he's given time, he can produce and get the ball in his playmakers' hands and let them do the rest. You look for about a 58% completion percentage. Rookies normally don't complete 60% of their passes. It's rare because the game is so fast. He's not a rookie this year, but the game is still fast. They're still finding their way. He's still going to be a guy that's looking to improve. Look for him to complete about 58, 59% of his passes. Adrian Peterson. You want to take some of the workload off of his plate if you're the Vikings, especially coming off this ACL injury. Look for 250 to 275 carries if you're the Vikings. I wouldn't be surprised if he shows that he can tote the rock, that he has more carries. But they need to scale that back a little bit. Stop putting so much on his plate. Prolong this man's career. You want to win, and you want to win soon, he's a part of that equation. You run him into the ground now, he won't be around in 4 years to help you turn this franchise around. 225 to 250 carries is most ideal for me for about, 1,250 yards and about 9 to 13 touchdowns. Toby Gerhart has to step up and be more of a factor this year. Take some of that pressure off of Adrian Peterson. Look for Toby Gerhart to have 150 carries to 175 carries for about 875 to 900 yards. He needs to be productive for them. They need him to step in and have some serious production. He has to help Christian Ponder in that passing game because without a serious running game, they don't have a lot in the passing game. Without play action fake, Christian Ponder could be in trouble. Look for 4 to 7 rushing touchdowns from him as well. Percy Harvin, you're looking for 70 to 75 catches. He needs to take that next step, get over 1,000 yards receiving. You're looking for 1,050 to 1,080 receiving yards. And you're looking for 7 to 9 touchdowns. You need him to be dynamic for you in this offense. The problem is there's not a lot around him. Teams can focus in on stopping Percy Harvin because there are not a lot of options for Christian Ponder outside of the tight ends and, of course, his backs to get the ball to. So it's going to be tough on Percy. And like I said, I like my Percy in the slot. But if he's got to play out wide, they need him to produce. Kyle Rudolph. I like Kyle Rudolph a lot, and he's not slated to be the Vikings' #1 receiver. They paid John Carlson to be that guy, but I like Kyle Rudolph, and I think he can be a #1 tight end in this league. So I'm looking for Kyle Rudolph to take that next step this year. Have 48 to 55 catches for about 650 to 700 yards, and to be a big target in the red zone, 6 to 8 touchdown receptions. They need their tight ends to be big for them in the red zone. Can't state that enough. They need their tight ends to produce in the red zone because they don't have big receivers. They don't have big guys that are physically imposing that force a matchup problem in the red zone. These tight ends have to be that for the Vikings in order for them to be successful. Vikings defense, they got to force more turnovers. They force fumbles, but they don't get interceptions. They have to take baby steps. I have them down for 29 to 32 turnovers forced. They get sacks. They're among the league leaders in sacks because of that defensive line, and I don't expect that to change. It's amazing when you think that the Vikings are often behind in games, which allows teams to run the football, yet they're always in the league lead or around the league lead in sacks, even though teams keep them off balance by being able to run the football. Jared Allen is an absolute menace. Brian Robertson is coming into his own. When Kevin Williams is playing football at a high level, he can get you sacks and pressure. They have a dominant defensive line, and I expect them to have 43 to 47 sacks again this year. Also, points per game. The Vikings have to be better in the amount of points they gave up. They gave up 28 points last year to opposing offenses. You can't give up 28 points, especially when your offense isn't scoring 20 points a game. You can't win ball games. 28 points a game equals a 3-13 record. They have to get that number down. Even if that number comes down to 24, that's an upgrade over last year. They need that number to come way down. They need that number to be closer to 21 points a game. I have them down for 21.2 points a game. They need to get that number down immensely because that number is way too high, especially for an offense that does not produce a lot of points. Plays of 40 yards given up. They gave up 13 last year. Way too many for a team, again, that's not scoring a lot of points, for a defense that gets as much pass rush as the Vikings do. That is too many passes over 40 yards being completed. They didn't give up a single run over 40 yards last year, but they gave up 13 passes over 40 yards. That goes to show you just how bad that secondary was. That number needs to come way down. And when I say way down, it needs to be around 6 or 7. They can't even afford to give up 8 or 9. I normally go 7 to 9. They can't even afford to go 7 to 9 because they can't afford to give up 9 plays of 40 yards or more. They don't have the luxury of being able to spare those kinds of big plays. They can only give up 6 or 7 of plays of over 40 yards in the passing game. Independent variable. The Vikings were dreadful at stopping the pass a year ago. Their pass rush is so good that it's inexcusable for their defense to be as bad as it is in the secondary. They have to be better in 2012 or they'll be 3-13 again. And teams don't have a problem racking up points in this league on porous pass defense. They're in a division with the Lions and the Packers, teams that will put 40 points on your head and 500 yards of total offense if you're not good in the secondary. They have to be better in the secondary, and they're hoping that Harrison Smith and Chris Cook can be guys that they can build around in the future to help them be better in the secondary. If this secondary can get more turnovers, 8 is not enough. 8 is not enough for a defense that can't get off the field, that can't stop people from scoring. If you're going to be terrible on defense, be terrible gambling and getting turnovers. Don't be terrible giving up touchdowns and not getting turnovers either. Be good at something. Be great at something. Don't be below average at everything. They have to force more turnovers in 2012, which takes us to our dependent variable. If they can force turnovers, if they can be better in the secondary, it'll get the ball back to that offense. That offense is not a juggernaut. They have to get the amount of points they're giving up down and give themselves a chance to be in the game in the fourth quarter. That's all you can ask for as a team. Give me a chance to win the game in the fourth quarter. And giving up 28 points a game is not going to allow your team to have a chance to win in the fourth quarter. Allow the running game to work for you. Allow Christian Ponder to not have to be special, but just be good at the quarterback position. Don't make him feel like he has to go out and win the game with his right arm. Allow him to be a guy that can work within the framework of the offense. Let the offense run the football, keep the game close, and give yourself a chance to win. Constants. Jared Allen, Adrian Peterson, constants for the Minnesota Vikings. Talked about them already. Don't need to go into it again. Without them, they would be a blip on the radar screen, or they wouldn't even be on the radar screen. They would just be a blip on the radar screen without these guys. With them, they're just a blip, a small, tiny little blip on the radar screen. Without them, they don't even exist on the NFL landscape. Conclusion. You're in a transitional phase. You're in a period that requires you to find a way to start building depth, start acquiring talent, start getting guys to gel together, start bringing your young quarterback along, start getting your head coach acclimated to coaching in the National Football League. And you hope to do that sooner rather than later, because if Christian Ponder doesn't pan out, then Leslie Frazier won't have a job, and you'll be in another transitional period, looking for a new head coach, looking for a new quarterback. So you got to hope these guys pan out. You got to hope that the team as a whole gets better. You got to hope that Adrian Peterson comes back and can produce for you in 2012, because you're still reeling. You're still feeling the effects of pushing all the chips to the middle of the table in 2009 and 2010, trying to win a Super Bowl with Brett Favre. You're still reeling from that. You're still trying to put the pieces together and clean up the stench that was left from the previous organization or the previous regime that was there that did a lot of things to damage this roster. You're cleaning up a mess that someone else left for you, and that's a shame, but that's the name of the NFL game. And so you have to do your best to find hidden gems, diamonds in the rough, and look to build for the future. You're going to be bad again, but you're going to take a step in the right direction. You won't be 3-13, but you'll be 5-11 this year. Take that, build upon it, and hope that you can start to find players that can help you win more ball games in the future. And that's going to do it for this episode. That's a touchdown. Throw the hands up. I'm going to tack on a quick extra point. I'm so disappointed in Chad Johnson and his arrest over the weekend. And now the Dolphins have released him. I spoke at great lengths and I got passionate about Chad Johnson and his love for football. This guy loves to play the game of football. And for him to go throw away an opportunity, probably his last in the league, was very disappointing. The Dolphins need receivers. They need playmakers. He was going to be the #1 guy out there, and he blew it. You had guys like Braylon Edwards, Terrell Owens begging for a spot, a chance to get back in the league. He was still in the league, and he blew it. I'm so disappointed in you, Chad. I can't believe that you squandered this opportunity. You know better than that, and now I can't help you. You can't you probably won't get another opportunity to play football, and I thought that you had a lot left in the tank. It's very unfortunate that you did this to yourself, and now you have to take the repercussions that are going to come from this. I don't think you're going to get another chance in this league, and that's a shame, because I really thought you had something left in the tank, and you had a chip on your shoulder. You had something to prove. Now you're just going to have to find a way to make ends meet out there in, I guess, reality land or something like that. Good luck to you in whatever you decide to do, but I'm very disappointed in you. And it's going to be interesting to see how they spin that on Hard Knocks coming up in the next couple episodes, because he was going to be a big part of that show. He's gone. Now they're going to have to fill that void, and I want to see how they talk about it on the show, because you can't dance around this issue. This is a big issue on this season of Hard Knocks. And that's going to do it for this episode. Again, drop a note in the inbox at inthelabroom@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook at In The Lab Room. I'm on Twitter. Twitter handle is In The Lab Room. Hit me up. You know, I want the feedback. Let's continue to do this thing. I'm having so much fun doing it. And I will see you again tomorrow. Same place, same time. I'm out.